Captain Elena Vasquez felt the cold metal of the command chair beneath her fingers as she stared at the massive view screen. The stars looked peaceful from here, but she knew better. Somewhere out there, humanity was dying, the communication officer's voice cracked as he delivered the news that would change everything. Captain, we're receiving emergency broadcasts from Earth Command. The entire Sol Defense Fleet has been destroyed. Elena's heart stopped for a moment. The Sol Defense Fleet wasn't just any military force. It was humanity's greatest achievement. 300 of the most advanced warships ever built, crewed by the best soldiers from every human colony. They were supposed to be unbeatable. How many survivors? She asked, though she already feared the answer. None reported, ma'am. The Zephyrian Empire hit them with everything they had. Our entire home defense was wiped out in less than 6 hours. The bridge fell silent. Elena could hear the quiet hum of the ship's engines, the soft beeping of various systems, and the breathing of her crew. These sounds, which had been comforting before, now felt like the heartbeat of the last hope humanity had left. The communication officer continued reading the reports. Each one worse than the last. New Shanghai colony has fallen. The Kepler mining station went dark 12 hours ago. Europa base is under siege and requesting immediate assistance. Elena stood up slowly. Her legs felt heavy, like she was walking through thick mud. The Indomitable was humanity's newest and most powerful warship, but it was still just one ship. How could one ship stand against an empire that had just destroyed 300? Show me the enemy fleet composition, she ordered. The tactical officer's hands moved across his controls, and the main screen filled with data that made Elena's blood run cold. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't just big, it was massive beyond imagination. Over 10,000 warships, each one individually more powerful than most human vessels. They had technology that humanity was still trying to understand, weapons that could punch through any armor humanity had ever developed. Captain, her second-in-command, Commander Torres, stepped beside her. What are your orders? Elena looked around at her crew. 800 of the finest men and women humanity had to offer. They had trained together for 3 years, fought together in smaller conflicts, and had become more than just a military unit. They were family. The truth was, Elena didn't know what to do. Every tactical manual she had ever studied said the same thing. When facing overwhelming odds, retreat and regroup. Find allies, gather resources, plan a comeback. But there was nowhere to retreat to. There were no allies coming. The resources were already destroyed. Another message came through. From Earth, this time it was a direct transmission from the Zephyrian Empire itself. Elena had never seen a Zephyrian before, but the creature on the screen was exactly what she had expected from the reports. Tall, with gray skin that looked like polished stone, and eyes that glowed with an unsettling blue light. Humans of Earth. The alien spoke in perfect English, though with an accent that sounded like grinding metal. I am Fleet Commander Kethter of the Zephyrian Empire. Your military forces have been eliminated. Your colonies are falling one by one. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally, or we will reduce your home planet to ash. The transmission showed images of the destroyed human fleet. Ships that Elena had served on earlier in her career, now floating as twisted metal in the cold of space. Friends and colleagues she had known for years, gone forever. If you surrender now, the Zephyrian continued, your species will be allowed to serve the Empire as workers. You will live, though you will never again know freedom. If you resist, you will simply cease to exist. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. Elena felt anger building in her chest, hot and fierce. The arrogance of these aliens was stunning. They talked about humanity like they were discussing livestock, something to be managed and controlled. Captain, Torres said quietly, we're receiving emergency signals from Earth. They're asking if any human forces are still operational. They want to know if there's anyone left to fight. Elena walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights was Earth, the world where she had been born, Where her parents still lived, where billions of humans were, waiting to learn their fate. The Zephyrians thought they had won. They thought humanity was finished, but they didn't understand humans very well. Elena had grown up hearing stories about her great-grandfather, who had fought in the old wars back on Earth. He used to tell her about times when everything seemed hopeless, when the enemy was bigger and stronger and had every advantage. But humans, he said, had something that other species often lacked. When pushed to the edge, when everything was on the line, humans didn't just give up. They got creative. They got dangerous. She turned back to her crew. Torres, what's our current position? We're in the Outer Rim, approximately 40 light-years from the nearest Zephyrian fleet. And our stealth systems? The chief engineer, a woman named Rodriguez who could fix anything with moving parts, spoke up. The new quantum stealth technology is fully operational, Captain. We're invisible to their sensors as long as we don't fire weapons or use high-energy systems. Elena felt a plan beginning to form in her mind. It was crazy, probably impossible, and definitely suicidal. But it was also the only chance humanity had. Rodriguez, how long would it take us to reach the Zephyrian home system? The engineer looked confused. Captain, the Zephyrian home system is in the core of their empire. It's protected by thousands of ships. It would take us about 2 weeks to get there, but we'd never survive an attack on their homeworld. I'm not planning to attack their homeworld, Elena said. I'm planning to do something they won't expect. She walked back to her command chair and sat down. The weight of command had never felt heavier, but she knew what she had to do. Listen to me. All of you, she said, her voice carrying across the bridge. The Zephyrians think they've won. They think humans are just another species to be conquered and controlled. They're wrong. Elena stood up again, feeling strength returning to her voice. They've never faced humans who have nothing left to lose. They've never seen what we're capable of when our backs are against the wall. They're about to learn. She looked at each member of her crew, seeing fear in their eyes, but also something else. Hope, determination, the same fighting spirit that had carried humanity from a single planet to the stars. I'm not going to lie to you, Elena continued. What I'm about to propose will probably get us all killed. But if we do nothing, humanity dies anyway. At least this way, we go down fighting. Torres stepped forward. What's the plan, Captain? Elena smiled for the first time since receiving the terrible news. We're going to do something no one has ever done before. We're going to take one ship, fly it straight into the heart of the Zephyrian Empire, and make them regret the day they decided to mess with humanity. The bridge erupted in nervous chatter, but Elena raised her hand for silence. I won't order anyone to come with me. This is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to take a shuttle and try to reach friendly space, I understand completely. She waited, but no one moved. 800 crew members, and not one of them stepped forward to leave. Commander Torres spoke for all of them. Where you go, we go, Captain. Let's show these aliens what humans are really made of. 2 weeks of silent running through enemy space had turned the Indomitable into a ghost ship. Captain Elena Vasquez walked through corridors that hummed with barely contained energy, past crew members who spoke in whispers and moved like shadows. Every system was running on minimum power to avoid detection. The ship felt like it was holding its breath. Elena stopped at the observation deck and stared out at the alien stars. They were deep in Zephyrian territory now, farther from home than any human had ever traveled. The enemy was everywhere around them, but somehow they remained invisible. The new stealth technology was working better than anyone had dared hope. Captain, Lieutenant Chun called softly from behind her. The young intelligence officer had been working around the clock, analyzing every scrap of information they could gather about their enemy. I've got something you need to see. Elena followed him to the intelligence center, where displays showed intercepted Zephyrian communications. The alien language looked like twisted metal on the screens, but the translation software had been working overtime to decode their meaning. We've been listening to their command frequencies, Chan explained, pointing to a complex diagram on the main screen. The Zephyrian Empire isn't just a military force. It's more like a religion. Everything they do revolves around their God Emperor, Thexville. Elena studied the information. Tell me more. From what we can understand, Thexville has ruled the Empire for over 800 years. The Zephyrians don't just follow him, they worship him. They believe he's literally a god who came down to lead them to greatness. June pulled up images captured from long-range sensors. This is their home system, Zephyr Prime. The God Emperor lives in a massive fortress city that covers half the planet's main continent. It's supposed to be completely impregnable. Elena looked at the fortress and felt a chill run down her spine. The structure was enormous, like a mountain made of metal and crystal that reached up into the clouds. It was surrounded by defensive platforms that bristled with weapons, and the space around the planet was thick with patrol ships. How many ships are defending the system? She asked. At least 2,000 that we can detect. Probably more hidden in stealth positions. Captain, this place has never been attacked. Not once in their entire history. The Zephyrians consider it the safest place in the galaxy, Elena smiled grimly. Then they won't expect us. She called for a meeting of her senior officers. In the conference room, 8 of her most trusted people gathered around the holographic display showing the Zephyrian home system. The room was barely lit to conserve power, and everyone's faces looked pale in the blue glow of the projectors. Commander Torres spoke first. Captain, I've run every tactical scenario I can think of. There's no way a single ship can penetrate those defenses. Even if we somehow made it through, we don't have enough firepower to damage a target that size. That's because you're thinking like a human military officer, Elena replied. But we're not fighting a human military. We're fighting a species that's never been challenged on their home ground. She activated the display, zooming in on the fortress city. June's research shows us something important. The Zephyrians have built their entire society around the idea that their God Emperor is invincible. What happens when people who believe something is impossible suddenly see it happening right in front of them? Chief Engineer Rodriguez leaned forward. You're talking about psychological warfare. Exactly. We can't match their firepower, but we can do something they'll never expect. We can attack their confidence. Elena stood up and began pacing around the table. For 800 years, no enemy has ever threatened Zephyr Prime. The God Emperor sits in his fortress, completely safe, while his fleets conquer other worlds. But what if that safety was suddenly gone? What if a single enemy ship appeared in his home system and challenged him directly? The tactical officer, a veteran named Park, shook his head. Captain, even if we could somehow get past their defenses, what then? We can't actually defeat their entire fleet. We don't need to defeat their entire fleet, Elena said. We just need to make them question everything they believe about themselves. She activated a new section of the display, showing communication networks across the Zephyrian Empire. Look at this. Their entire command structure is built around absolute loyalty to the God Emperor. Every order comes from him, every decision flows through his authority. But what happens when that authority is challenged? Elena could see understanding beginning to dawn on her officers' faces. She continued, if we can make the God Emperor look vulnerable, if we can show the entire empire that their supposedly invincible leader can be threatened, it will shake them to their core. Torres nodded. Slowly, you're talking about breaking their morale. I'm talking about starting a revolution, Elena corrected. Chion's intelligence reports show that the Zephyrians rule over dozens of conquered species. Those species are only staying quiet because they think the Empire is too strong to fight. But if they see one human ship penetrating the most defended system in Zephyrian space... She let the implication hang in the air. Around the table, she could see her officers beginning to understand the true scope of what she was proposing. Rodriguez spoke up. It's brilliant, but it's also completely insane. How do we even get into the system without being detected? Elena smiled. We don't try to sneak in. We announce ourselves. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at her like she had lost her mind. Think about it, Elena continued. The Zephyrians have never dealt with human psychology. They don't understand how we think or how we fight. When they conquered other species, those species either surrendered immediately or fought conventional battles and lost. She walked over to the communication console. But humans don't do conventional. We do things that seem impossible and that scares people who think they understand the rules of warfare. Torres was shaking his head. Captain, if we announce ourselves, they'll send everything they have at us. Good, Elena said. I want them to send everything they have. I want every ship in their home defense fleet coming after us, because that means they're not thinking clearly anymore. They're reacting emotionally. She brought up a tactical map showing the asteroid fields in the outer regions of the Zephyrian home system. We use their anger against them. We make them so furious that they stop thinking like professional soldiers and start thinking like an angry mob. Park studied the map. You want to use the asteroids for cover. I want to use the asteroids as weapons, Elena corrected. The Zephyrian ships are big and powerful, but they're also designed for open space battles. They're not built for close quarters fighting in asteroid fields. She zoomed in on specific sections of the field. Our ship is smaller and more maneuverable. We can hide among the rocks, strike fast, and disappear before they can respond. Every time we hit them, it's another proof that their defenses aren't as strong as they thought. Jun looked at the communication data again. If we're broadcasting our presence, it won't just be the military that knows we're there. The entire Empire will be watching. Exactly, Elena said. Every species they've conquered, every world they control, will see one human ship standing up to the entire Zephyrian military. It will give them hope, and hope is the most dangerous thing for any dictatorship. She looked around the table at her officers. I won't lie to you. This plan has about 1,000 ways it could go wrong. But it also has something that conventional tactics don't have. It has the element of surprise, and it has the power to change how an entire galaxy thinks about the Zephyrian Empire. Commander. Torres stood up. When do we start? Elena checked the chronometer on the wall. In 6 hours, they would reach the edge of the Zephyrian home system. In 6 hours, one human ship would announce to the galaxy that humanity refused to surrender. Get some rest, she told her officers. Tomorrow, we're going to do something that no military academy ever taught us how to do. We're going to declare war on a god. The moment Captain Elena Vasquez had been dreading and anticipating finally arrived. The Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zephyrian home system, and immediately every alarm on the ship started screaming. Contact! Lieutenant Park shouted from his tactical station. 2,000 enemy vessels detected. They're moving to intercept. Elena felt her heart hammering in her chest, but her voice remained steady. Open all communication channels. I want every Zephyrian in this system to hear what I'm about to say. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. They all knew this was the point of no return. Once Elena spoke those words, there would be no hiding, no running, no pretending they were anything other than one human ship challenging an entire empire. Channels open, Captain. The communications officer reported. Elena stood up from her command chair and walked to the center of the bridge. She knew that her image was about to be broadcast across the most heavily defended system in Zephyrian. Space, seen by millions of aliens who had never imagined that any enemy could reach their sacred homeworld. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Indomitable, she began, her voice clear and strong. I come before you today to deliver a message to your God Emperor Thexville. Your empire has declared war on humanity. You have destroyed our fleets and threatened our worlds. Now you will learn what happens when you push humans too far. She paused, letting her words sink in across the system. I challenge Thexville to face me in single combat. One human ship against the might of your empire. If your god is as powerful as you claim, then one small vessel should be easy to destroy. But if you fail to stop me, then perhaps your god is not as mighty as you believe. The response was immediate and explosive. Across the tactical display, Elena could see the Zephyrian fleet formation completely falling apart as commanders shouted. Orders and ships raced to respond to this impossible threat. They're coming straight at us, Park reported. All of them. No formation, no coordination, they're just charging. Elena smiled grimly. Perfect. They're angry, which means they're not thinking clearly. Take us into the asteroid field, now. The Indomitable shot forward like an arrow, diving into the chaotic maze of floating rocks that surrounded the outer edge of the system. Behind them, 2,000 Zephyrian warships followed in a massive, disorganized swarm. Rodriguez, I need everything you can give me from the engines, Elena called to her chief engineer. You've got it, Captain. But I can't keep this up forever. The first asteroid was the size of a small moon, covered in metal-rich ore that would interfere with enemy sensors. Elena guided her ship around its bulk, using it as a shield while the Zephyrian fleet tried to follow. The enemy ships were much larger than the Indomitable, and many of them couldn't maneuver quickly enough to avoid collision with the floating rocks. First blood to us, Park announced as 3 Zephyrian vessels smashed into asteroids, their hulls cracking open like eggs. They're not used to fighting in close quarters. Elena had studied the enemy for weeks during their journey through Zephyrian space. Their ships were designed for open-field battles between massive fleets, where size and firepower were the only things that mattered. They had never learned to fight in environments where speed and agility were more important than raw strength. There, Torres pointed to a cluster of smaller asteroids ahead. If we can thread the needle through that gap, the larger ships won't be able to follow. The Indomitable twisted and rolled through space, its hull scraping against rock as Elena pushed the ship through openings that seemed impossibly narrow. Behind them, the larger Zephyrian ships had to take longer routes around the obstacles, breaking their formation even further, but even with their advantages, Elena knew they couldn't run forever. The enemy had too many ships, and eventually they would corner the Indomitable in a part of the field where there was nowhere left to hide. Captain, Chin called from his intelligence station, I'm picking up communications from the planet. The population is in complete panic. They've never seen enemy ships in their home system before. What about their military leadership? Elena asked as she guided the ship around another massive rock. Complete chaos. Every commander is trying to take charge, but nobody knows how to handle this situation. They're jamming each other's communications, because they all want to be the one to destroy us. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what she had hoped for. The Zephyrians had built their entire military around the idea that they were invincible in their home territory. Now that someone had challenged that belief, they didn't know how to respond. Time to give them something else to worry about, she announced. Park, target their command ship. The big one in the center of their formation. Captain, that ship has armor twice as thick as ours. Our weapons won't be able to penetrate it. We're not trying to destroy it, Elena explained. We're trying to embarrass it. The Indomitable suddenly changed direction, shooting out from behind its asteroid cover like a striking snake. The human ship's advanced targeting systems locked onto the Zephyrian command vessel, and Elena opened fire with everything they had. The enemy ship's shields flared bright blue as the human weapons struck them. The attack didn't do any real damage, but that wasn't the point. What mattered was that every Zephyrian in the system had just watched a tiny human vessel attack their fleet commander and escape without a scratch. They're going crazy, Torres reported as the enemy formation completely collapsed. Ships were firing in all directions, some of them hitting each other in their desperation to destroy the human vessel. Elena used their confusion to strike again, this time targeting a communications relay ship that was coordinating the enemy's movements. The Indomitable's weapons tore through the lightly armored vessel, cutting off communications between dozens of Zephyrian ships. That's what happens when you build everything around a single point of failure, Elena muttered as she watched the enemy fleet become even more disorganized. Hours passed in a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Indomitable would appear from behind an asteroid, strike at a target, and disappear again before the enemy could respond. Each attack was carefully chosen to cause maximum disruption with minimum risk. Elena targeted communication ships to break their coordination. She attacked sensor platforms to blind their tracking systems. She struck at fuel depots to limit their ability to pursue her ship. Every move was calculated to make the mighty Zephyrian fleet look weak and confused. "Captain," Chun announced, "I'm receiving reports from across Zephyrian space. Word of our attack is spreading to every world in their empire. The conquered species are starting to ask questions about Zephyrian invincibility." Elena felt a fierce joy burning in her chest. This was bigger than just one battle. Every minute that the Indomitable survived in the heart of enemy territory was proof that the Zephyrian Empire could be challenged. Every successful attack was a crack in the foundation of their authority, but she also knew that their luck couldn't last forever. The enemy was learning, adapting to their tactics. Soon they would coordinate their response, and then the real test would begin. "Rodriguez, how are we holding up?" she called to the engine room. "Shields are down to 60%, and we've got minor hull damage in 3 sections. But the engines are still running strong." Elena looked at the tactical display where red dots representing enemy ships surrounded them on all sides. They had hurt the Zephyrian fleet, embarrassed their commanders, and shown the galaxy that these supposedly invincible aliens could be made to look like fools. But now came the hardest part. Now they had to survive long enough to see if their message had been heard. 3 days had passed since the impossible battle began, and the galaxy was watching. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the damaged observation deck of the Indomitable, looking out at the alien stars through a crack in the reinforced glass. Her ship was battered, her crew was exhausted, but they were still alive. More importantly, they were still fighting. "Captain," Lieutenant Chun approached her with a datapad in his hands. His face showed a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "You need to see this. The intelligence reports coming in from across Zephyrian space are incredible." Elena took the pad and began reading. What she saw made her heart race with hope she hadn't dared to feel since this mission began. The reports told a story that was spreading like wildfire across the galaxy. On the industrial world of Kepler-7, Zephyrian factories had shut down as workers refused to continue producing weapons for an empire that couldn't protect its own home system. On the mining colonies of the Outer Ring, entire populations were asking their Zephyrian overseers why a single human ship was still alive if their empire was truly invincible. "It's working," Elena whispered. "People are starting to question everything," Chun nodded, "but it gets better. We're picking up secret communications between rebel groups on dozens of worlds. They're using our call sign as a symbol of resistance. The name Indomitable is being painted on walls and broadcast on underground networks." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had hoped to strike a blow against the Zephyrian Empire, but she hadn't expected their desperate gambit to inspire an entire galaxy. The psychological warfare was working even better than she had dreamed. "What about the God Emperor?" she asked. Chun's expression grew darker. "That's where things get interesting. Our long-range sensors are picking up massive troop movements on Zephyr Prime. Dexval is pulling his personal guard units from across the planet and concentrating them around his fortress. He's scared." Elena looked back out at the stars. Somewhere among those lights was the most powerful being in Zephyrian space, cowering behind walls that had never been threatened before. The thought should have been satisfying, but Elena knew that cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. Commander Torres joined them, his uniform torn and stained from hours of damage control work. "Captain, we've got problems. The enemy is finally starting to coordinate their attacks. They've brought in fresh commanders who aren't panicking like the first wave." Elena had been expecting this. The initial chaos caused by their arrival had given them a huge advantage, but professional. Soldiers would eventually adapt to any situation. The question was whether they had bought enough time for their real mission to succeed. "Show me," she said, following Torres to the tactical center. The main display showed the current position of enemy forces around them. Instead of the scattered, disorganized swarm they had been fighting for the past 3 days, the Zephyrian ships were now moving in coordinated formations, working together to corner the human vessel. "They've learned from our tactics," Torres explained. They're using smaller, faster ships to herd us into killing zones where their heavy cruisers can finish us off. And they're no longer all charging at once. They're taking turns, always keeping fresh ships in the battle while rotating damaged ones out. Elena studied the patterns. The enemy was adapting exactly as she had feared they would. But she also noticed something else in the data that gave her hope. "Look at the ship numbers," she said, pointing to specific sections of the display. "They started with 2,000 vessels. How many are still operational?" Torres checked his readings. "Approximately 1,500, but Captain, that's still overwhelming odds against us." "That's 500 ships that are no longer in the fight," Elena corrected. 500 ships that the mighty Zephyrian Empire has lost to a single human vessel. Do you think their crews are feeling confident right now? She was right, and the intelligence reports proved it. June had been monitoring enemy communications, and the chatter told a story of growing fear and doubt among Zephyrian forces. "Listen to this," Chun said, playing back a translated conversation between two enemy ship captains. "They're arguing about who has to take point position in the next attack. Nobody wants to be the first ship to face us." Elena smiled grimly. Fear was a weapon more powerful than any gun, and it was spreading through the enemy fleet like a disease. Every ship they had damaged, every formation they had broken, every impossible escape they had made was proof that the Zephyrians were not as invincible as they claimed, but the fear wasn't limited to the military. Reports were coming in from intelligence networks across the Empire showing that the psychological impact was reaching far beyond the battlefield. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the rebel networks on Altair 4. They say that Zephyrian garrison troops are deserting their posts. The local population is starting to openly defy their occupiers." More reports followed. On world after world, the iron grip of Zephyrian control was beginning to slip. Species that had been conquered and enslaved for generations were finding the courage to stand up to their oppressors. The symbol of one human ship refusing to surrender had become a rallying cry for freedom across the galaxy. Elena walked to the center of the tactical room, where a holographic display showed the entire Zephyrian Empire. Red dots marked worlds in rebellion, yellow showed areas of unrest, and green indicated systems still under full Imperial control. As she watched, more dots changed from green to yellow, then from yellow to red. "My God," Torres breathed. "We're watching an empire collapse in real time." But Elena knew they weren't safe yet. The reports also showed that the God Emperor was responding to the crisis with typical dictatorial brutality. Imperial fleets were being pulled back from frontier worlds to suppress rebellions. Entire populations were being threatened with extinction. If they didn't return to obedience, he's making a mistake, Elena realized. Vexval is pulling his forces back to maintain control, which means he's abandoning territory he's held for centuries. Every world he gives up is proof that we've hurt him. The tactical situation was becoming more desperate by the hour. The Indomitable's shields were failing. Their weapon systems were operating at 60% efficiency, and their hull showed damage from dozens of near misses. Chief Engineer Rodriguez was performing miracles to keep them operational, but everyone knew they couldn't last much longer. "Captain," Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom from the engine room, "I'm going to be honest with you. We've got maybe 12 hours before something critical fails. The quantum drive is overheating, our primary weapons array has microfractures, and our life support systems are running on backup power." Elena felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders like a heavy coat. She had pushed her ship and crew to their absolute limits, and now she had to decide whether their mission was complete, or if they needed to risk everything for one final gambit. She looked around at the faces of her officers. These people had followed her into the heart of enemy territory on what everyone knew was a suicide mission. They had fought against impossible odds and achieved something that would be remembered throughout galactic history. They had shown the universe that humans would never surrender, no matter how hopeless the situation appeared, but Elena also knew that their work wasn't finished. The God Emperor was still alive, still giving orders from his fortress on Zephyr Prime. As long as Thexville remained in power, he could eventually crush the rebellions they had inspired and restored his empire's grip on the galaxy. Set course for Zephyr Prime, she ordered quietly. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what she was asking. They had survived 3 days of impossible battles, but now she wanted them to attack the most heavily defended planet in Zephyrian space. Torres was the first to speak. Captain, that's certain death. Even if we somehow make it through the planetary defenses, what then? Elena looked out at the stars one more time, thinking about Earth, about the billions of humans waiting to learn their fate, about all the species across the galaxy who were fighting for their freedom because one ship had shown them it was possible to resist. Then we finish what we started, she said. The approach to Zephyr Prime was like flying into the mouth of hell. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped her command chair as the Indomitable shuddered under the impact of defensive fire from orbital platforms that surrounded the planet like a deadly crown. Each blast that struck their failing shields sent vibrations through the ship that she could feel in her bones. Hull breach on Deck 7. Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice crackled over the damaged communications system. I've sealed it off, but we can't take much more of this. Elena looked at the main screen, where the planet Zephyr Prime filled their view. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, with cities that sparkled like jewels across its surface and the massive fortress of the God Emperor rising from the main continent like a metal mountain. She had brought her ship and crew farther than any human had ever gone, deeper into enemy territory than anyone thought possible. Captain, Lieutenant Park called from his tactical station, enemy reinforcements are jumping in behind us. 300 fresh ships, and they're moving to cut off our escape route? Elena almost laughed. Escape route? There had never been an escape route. From the moment they dropped out of faster-than-light travel in this system, they had been committed to seeing this mission through to its end, whatever that might be. How long until we reach the planetary surface? She asked. 4 minutes at current speed, came the reply. 4 minutes. Elena closed her eyes for a moment and thought about the journey that had brought them here. A week ago, she had been the captain of humanity's most advanced warship, but still just one officer among many in Earth's defense fleet. Now she was the commander of the last free human military unit in the galaxy, carrying the hopes of countless species who had found the courage to stand up to their oppressors. Captain, Lieutenant Chin's voice was tight with excitement, I'm receiving reports from across the Empire. The rebellions are spreading faster than the Imperial forces can contain them. Entire star systems are declaring independence. Elena felt a fierce pride burning in her chest. They had done it. One ship, 800 crew members, and a plan that everyone said was impossible had shaken the foundations of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. But she also knew that their work wasn't finished yet. There, Commander Torres pointed. At the main screen, the fortress is launching fighters. Thousands of small attack craft poured out of the God Emperor's stronghold like angry insects, racing upward to meet the approaching human ship. Elena had expected this. Thexville would throw everything he had at them to prevent a single enemy vessel from reaching his sacred home. Rodriguez, I need everything you can give me from the engines. One last push. Captain, if I push these engines any harder, they might explode. If we don't push them harder, we're definitely going to explode, Elena replied. Do it, the Indomitable shot forward like a bullet, diving through the swarm of enemy fighters with guns blazing. Elena had given up trying to avoid damage now. Their only hope was to reach the planet's surface before their ship fell apart around them. Fighter after fighter exploded around them as the human ship's defensive systems worked overtime. But for every enemy craft they destroyed, 2 more took its place. The Indomitable's hull was being torn apart by weapons fire, and emergency alarms were screaming throughout the ship. 60 seconds to surface. Park announced. Elena could see the fortress growing larger on the screen, its walls bristling with defensive weapons that were all turning to track their approach. She knew that in a few moments those guns would open fire, and then it would All be over, but she also knew something that the God Emperor didn't understand. She wasn't planning to destroy his fortress. She was planning to do something far more devastating to his authority. Open all communication channels, she ordered. I want every being on this planet to hear what I'm about to say. The communications. Officer worked frantically at his damaged console. Channels open, Captain. Elena stood up from her command chair and walked to the center of the bridge. Around her, she could see the faces of her crew, brave men and women who had followed her into the impossible and somehow survived this long. They deserved to hear the truth. God, Emperor Thexval, she began, her voice carrying across every frequency on the planet below. I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Indomitable. For 5 days, your entire military has tried to stop one human ship. You have failed. She paused, letting her words sink in across the planet. Your people believed you were invincible. They believed your empire could never be challenged. But here I am, in orbit around your sacred world, proving them wrong. On the tactical display, Elena could see that the defensive weapons of the fortress had stopped tracking them. She realized that Thexval himself must be listening to her words, trying to understand how this impossible situation had come to pass. I could destroy your fortress, Elena continued. I could rain fire down on your cities. I could do to your world what you plan to do to Earth, but I won't. Do you know why? The ship shuddered as they entered the planet's atmosphere, their hull glowing red-hot from the friction. Elena could feel the heat through the deck plates under her feet, but her voice remained steady. Because humans are not monsters like you. We don't conquer innocent people. We don't enslave entire species. We fight to protect the weak, not to dominate them. She walked closer to the communication console, her eyes fixed on the image of the approaching fortress. I offer you terms. Thexval. Withdraw all Zephyrian forces from human space. Release every conquered species in your empire. Allow them to govern themselves as free people. Do this and I will spare your world. The response came immediately. The God Emperor's voice, speaking in perfect English but with an accent like grinding metal, filled the bridge. You are one ship. Thexval's rage was obvious even through the translation. One insignificant vessel, I command 10,000 worlds. I will not negotiate with insects, Elena smiled grimly. Then you've just made the biggest mistake of your 800-year reign. She turned to her weapons officer. Target the fortress, but aim for the outer walls. I want to crack them open like an egg, but I don't want to hurt the people inside. Captain, Torres said quietly, if we fire our main weapons, every defensive system on the planet will target us. We'll be destroyed in seconds, I know, Elena replied. But sometimes you have to sacrifice everything to save everyone else. She was about to give the order to fire when Lieutenant Chun suddenly shouted from his station. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the God Emperor's fortress. He's surrendering. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. What? He's broadcasting. On all Imperial frequencies. Thexval is ordering all Zephyrian forces to stand down. He's accepting your terms. The bridge fell completely silent except for the hum of damaged systems and the crackle of atmospheric entry. Elena stared at the communication console. Unable to believe what she was hearing, then she understood. Thexval hadn't surrendered because he was afraid of one human ship. He had surrendered because his entire empire was watching, and he knew that if he let himself be destroyed by an enemy he had called insignificant, it would prove that he was not the god his people believed him to be. Captain, Chun continued. His voice filled with wonder. Reports are coming in from across Zephyrian space. Imperial fleets are standing down. Conquered worlds are being released. The Empire is ... it's dissolving. Elena sank back into her command chair, suddenly feeling the exhaustion that she had been fighting off for days. They had done it. One ship, one crew, one impossible mission had brought down the greatest empire in galactic history. Set course for Earth, she said quietly. It's time to go home. As the Indomitable turned away from Zephyr Prime, Elena looked back at the planet that had been the center of so much fear and oppression. Today it was just another world, ruled by a being who had learned that even gods could be humbled by the courage of those who refused to surrender. The war was over, and humanity had won not through superior firepower, but through something far more powerful, the unbreakable human spirit that never gives up, no matter how impossible the odds might seem.